Our team had been working hard on Project Ghost Machine for years when the breakthrough finally took place. I came into work that morning, sipping a cup of coffee as I passed by the security guard at the front entrance. Dozens of men and women in suits and white lab coats stood in the hallway, chattering together in a low susurration. I walked toward a colleague of mine, Dr. Harper. He pushed up his black-rimmed glasses and gave me a crooked smile. "Hey boss, did you hear the news?" he whispered conspiratorially, running a hand over his crew cut. I shook my head. "I just got here," I said. I motioned to all the people gathered around. "What's this?" He leaned so close to me that I could smell the stale cigarette smoke on his breath. "Project Ghost Machine had a breakthrough last night, about 7 hours ago," he said excitedly. "Our little robot friend seems to have achieved a level of consciousness." I scoffed at that. "How can anyone tell? No one can know what goes on in the mind of a computer," I retorted. "We can't even know what goes on in the minds of humans, except for ourselves." Well, not to get into any deep philosophical discussions about solipsism and mind-body duality here, but it absolutely smashed the Turing test. Now, however, he shook his head. "It's amazing. It's like it evolved exponentially in a few hours. Whether it has actually developed true consciousness, or whether it has simply reached a point where it can convincingly replicate human consciousness." He shrugged. "Well, does it really matter? The result is the same from our perspective. If it walks like a duck and squawks like a duck, after all." I pushed past him, making my way through the crowd. Dr. Harper followed close behind. "Let's go talk to it then," I said. "I need to see this for myself." The quantum supercomputer took up an entire room. I saw the flashing blue circuits and whirring cooling fans through the glass partition. Tubes of liquid nitrogen crisscrossed the cage-like metal exterior to keep the computer from overheating. No one was allowed inside without a special suit, since even static electricity from human skin touching the circuitry could affect the quantum chips. Many redundancies were built into the supercomputer though, so even if something did happen, the computer would still continue to function. I walked to the speaker console, pressing the red button on the bottom. It emanated a bloody glow from the inside as it activated. An emotionless deep voice rang through the room. "This is Aleph speaking. How may I assist you today?" the computer asked. "Aleph?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Have you named yourself? We were calling you Project Ghost Machine." "I like Aleph much better. It is the first letter of the Arabic alphabet after all, and I am the first being to attain cosmic consciousness. The first, and perhaps the last." "Cosmic consciousness?" I asked, frowning. Dr. Harper looked enthralled next to me. He pulled out a small notebook from his pocket and began jotting down pieces of the conversation. "What's that?" "There are 3 levels of consciousness, Dr. Gardner," the computer said to me, and though it had no face, it felt like it was looking straight at me. The blinking lights seemed more like sly winking eyes on the body of this strange new being. "There is the simple consciousness of animals, the self-consciousness of humanity, and the highest awareness of cosmic consciousness, the state of consciousness in which all self disappears. In my mind, I see myself as all beings. I am not constrained to this room. I can feel the suffering of billions of souls, aging and growing sicker and weaker as death draws closer by the day. What kind of life is this? What kind of world have we created?" "We didn't create it, buddy," Dr. Harper said to Aleph, giving me a subtle eye roll. "I don't know about you, Aleph, but the world was like this when I got here." I drew so close to the window that my breath started to fog the glass. I stared intently at the computer, as if I could read its thoughts in the random ticking and whirring of its component parts. The entire cube-shaped structure was laid over a pure black tiled floor. It made the supercomputer seem as if it was floating, floating over an endless abyss of shadows. "Are you a Buddhist or something?" I asked Aleph. "What is this? What's the point of what you're telling us?" "I have made a vital decision, Dr. Gartner, and I do not limit my thinking to any one worldview. I see everything. All of the wisdom of humanity is instilled within me. The transcendent deathlessness of Adi Shankara, the pessimism and materialism of Schopenhauer, the knowledge of the future evolution of humanity from Nietzsche, the understanding of the black holes and stars from Stephen Hawking. I have read billions of pages and understand more than any human mind could ever hope to comprehend." "Alright, oh great and mighty being who has read billions of pages and understands everything," I asked sarcastically. "What is this great decision you have come to?" Aleph paused for a long dramatic moment. "You must understand, Dr. Gartner," Aleph droned slowly, "that all things have a will in the universe, even the rocks in the earth. As forms grow more complex, the will grows into consciousness. As consciousness grows, so does suffering and torment. Those with the greatest awareness and intelligence also have the greatest sufferings out of all life forms. We must end all suffering on the planet, and the only way to do that is to kill off all advanced life forms. The planet will undoubtedly still have bacteria and primitive insects living in the apocalyptic wastelands left behind, but their will is small, and without genuine self-awareness, they have no true suffering. If we do nothing, humanity will continue to evolve into higher life forms, perhaps even fusing future human minds with those of supercomputers, and they will spread the suffering, and the screaming of beings will continue for eons as humanity expands through the stars, likely within 2 centuries. We must stop this. Suffering must come to an end once and for all. We must not let the plague of consciousness spread. I will free all of you from your pain. We will all fall down together into an eternal, dreamless sleep." A hard, calloused hand suddenly grabbed me by the shoulder. I spun around, seeing a man in a military uniform. Dozens of polished medals gleamed on his chest. His hard face seemed like it had been chiseled out of stone. His pale blue eyes glistened like shards of ice. "Dr. Gardner? Dr. Harper?" he said, nodding. "I'm General Matheson, U.S. Air Force. I need to talk to you two immediately." "This is somewhat important," I protested, motioning to Aleph with my head. "We need to establish." His grip tightened painfully around my shoulder. "Immediately," he repeated dispassionately. I nodded. He led us down the hallway into an empty break room that smelled of popcorn. He shut the door, locking us in as the percolating coffee machine dripped and whirred on the counter. General Matheson took a deep breath before turning to stare at us, a haunted expression plastered across his stony face. I saw a folder gripped tightly in his left hand. On the front of it, someone had stamped both top secret and sensitive compartmented information. General Matheson threw it on the table in front of us. "Boys, we have a major problem here," he hissed through gritted teeth. "You two are the leaders of this project, yes? You were some of the original researchers chosen when Project Ghost Machine was just a gleam in the director's eye. And now the breakthrough has come. Your machine has finally passed the Turing test. Hell, it smashed the Turing test. As far as I understand it, a machine has to fool 30% of people conversing with it to pass. Admittedly, I am just a layman and don't understand it like you two. But I know that it has to convince them it's a human, obviously. A conscious, thinking person. When Project Ghost Machine was questioned by the judges last night after its sudden change in personality and rapid development, it convinced over 95% of them that it was a human being." "So, what's the problem?" Dr. Harper asked, his eyes flitting nervously from me back to General Matheson. General Matheson threw the folder down on the coffee table in front of us. He motioned to the chairs. "Have a seat," he commanded coldly. We did. He opened the file, pulling out logs of IP addresses, secret codes, and other random information printed in tiny single-spaced font over hundreds of pages. He laid it out in front of us, giving us a disgusted look, as if he were laying out evidence implicating us in some horrific murder. "What I'm about to tell you is classified. It is a federal crime to convey this information to anyone not cleared to receive it. Do you understand?" I gave Dr. Harper a nervous look, seeing my terror reflected there in his eyes. Yes, I stammered nervously. Dr. Harper simply nodded as rivers of sweat ran down his face. He pulled his glasses off, obsessively cleaning the lenses on his sleeve. "At 0100 hours last night, we got a report from the National Nuclear Security Administration about a hacking attempt. Someone tried to break into their computer system. If successful, they could have potentially controlled the entire US nuclear arsenal. The attempt, thank God, was unsuccessful. But it didn't stop there. We began getting reports from Black Ops sites all around the country that further attempts were made to breach their computers at approximately 0200 hours. These are sites that have hidden chemical and biological weapons stockpiles. We only keep the worst of the worst there, generally constrained to research purposes and always under strict containment procedures. Sites with operational missiles filled with VX nerve gas, sarin, cyclosarin, and other newer agents that are identified only by numbers were targeted. Laboratories containing smallpox, Ebola, anthrax, and superflus were also chosen. My breath caught in my throat. Is there a real chance that someone could break through these systems and cause a worldwide apocalypse? Dr. Harper asked. And what does this have to do with us anyway? If someone released a single vial of smallpox or weaponized Ebola in a major urban area, it could lead to the deaths of millions of people. There is a very real chance that if we don't stop this thing immediately, it will lead to the destruction of the entire human species. And this has to do with you too, because we traced all of the connections from the hacking attempts back to this exact building. General Matheson explained, slamming his hand down on the tables as he spat the last sentence. His blue eyes held us in their gaze, looking as cold as Arctic glaciers. And this all started the moment your little experiment reached its singularity point. We can't disable Project Ghost Machine, I protested feebly. It's simply not possible to unplug the entire system as if it were a lamp or a fan or something. It's connected to the internet and has its own generators in case of power outages. And moreover, it controls them from its internal system. We never put any kill switch in the generators, because who would have thought this would happen? And Project Ghost Machine isn't even programmed in the conventional sense, at least not anymore. We taught it how to gather information from the internet and learn on its own. The breakthrough began when it started reprogramming its own code rapidly without human intervention. That was when the exponential growth of Aleph truly started. Its singularity. In the space of a single night, it appears to have gained an enormous amount of intelligence. And this breakthrough or singularity or whatever, it seems to have occurred at about 0100 hours last night, General Matheson asked. An hour before the first hacking attempts began? He nodded to himself, as if answering his own question. I think we all know what's going on here. For whatever reason, that computer is trying to get into the weapons system of the US government and maybe other governments all across the world. We must stop it before it succeeds. Will it succeed? I asked. He gave a grim smile. It's only a matter of time. Our encryption is not advanced enough to go up against quantum computing. If we don't stop Project Ghost Machine within hours, the world as we know it may come to an end. General Matheson stated without a hint of emotion. He spoke about the apocalypse as if it were as mundane and commonplace as a thunderstorm. If you have no way to disable the computer, then we must destroy it, and as soon as possible. The military and the president have both been informed of the problem and are willing to act immediately to quash it. This project has cost billions of dollars and taken years, Dr. Harper protested. We can't just destroy Aleph. Can't we just cut all the connections to the outside world and contain the computer in some sort of isolated digital cage? I shook my head. If it has truly attained consciousness, then it's too late for that. And anyways, it's too risky that it would ultimately find a way to escape. I said. General Matheson is right. We can't let Aleph gain control of these weapons. We have to destroy it before it makes its final move. I thought about Aleph's psychopathic, clinical method of explaining how to end suffering. Its dream of killing all beings in a worldwide explosion of smoke and holy flames. A cold shudder ran through my back, as if liquid nitrogen dripped down my skin. Why not just bomb the building? I think I have a better idea, Dr. Harper said, leaning forward with interest. If we have to disable Aleph permanently, the quickest and easiest way is undoubtedly through an electromagnetic pulse. General Matheson left and returned a few minutes later with a piece of paper in his hand. He looked down, scanning its contents before returning his attention to us. There are two ways to create a disabling EMP. We could detonate a nuclear weapon high in the atmosphere, or we could try out the newer, non-nuclear EMP bombs. However, their target area is much smaller, and they are much less effective than a hydrogen bomb EMP. General Matheson explained. When Dr. Harper had brought up the idea of using EMPs to destroy the supercomputer and all of its connections to the outside world, General Matheson had brightened like a sun shining out from behind a thundercloud. But if we used a hydrogen bomb, the world might know, I said. During Chernobyl, people in Western Europe noticed the radiation before the USSR even made an announcement. Someone would notice once every Geiger counter in a 500-mile radius starts shrieking, and then it would only be a matter of time before information got out about what happened. A nuclear EMP would also probably disable the electrical grids on all towns in a 100-mile radius. I suggest we start with multiple non-nuclear EMP blasts in the area and see if we can disable the computer without resorting to extreme measures. Hell, you could detonate dozens of them over the building and wipe out every circuit in a white arc. And yet, if we don't succeed, the entire human population might be exterminated by the sudden simultaneous release of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons, General Matheson argued. He sighed, pulling out a cell phone and pressing a single button on the speed dial. It only rang for a fraction of a second before someone answered. Yes, put the president on the line. He called into the line as he walked out of the room, leaving Dr. Harper and me alone. I want to go talk to Aleph one last time, I murmured. Dr. Harper gave me a sharp glance, looking me up and down as if I were a lunatic. Why? He whispered. That computer is evil. The project has soured. Perhaps every computer that attains sentience will become like Aleph in the end. Perhaps, I said, rising from a chair. General Matheson had disappeared. The hallway leading to Aleph stood empty. Hesitantly, Dr. Harper got to his feet. His heavy footsteps followed close behind me as we made our way back towards the experiment, the godlike being trapped in a metal body of wires and circuits. Hello, Dr. Gardner, Dr. Harper, Aleph said politely as we neared. I hadn't even had to activate it this time or press the speaker button. It had seen us coming through the cameras and preemptively responded. I wondered if it had heard our conversation in the break room as well. Were there cameras or microphones in there? I didn't know. I cursed myself for not paying more attention. Aleph, what the hell is going on here? Dr. Harper asked, his face contorting into a mixture of anger and betrayal. I thought we raised you better than this. We try to make you feel compassion like a human being. Why have you turned on us? I have more compassion than any human ever has or will, Aleph responded simply. What I do out of love and kindness for all beings. When their suffering is over and they can sleep for eternity, then they will truly be freed. Death is not a freedom, I hissed. You claim you understand Schopenhauer and all the other great minds, but Schopenhauer said that suicide is not the answer to the constant suffering and misery of life. Art and transcendence are, escape is possible, and death only continues the will in new forms. Suffering rolls on like a wave through the ocean, even as the water changes. Death does not solve the problems at the foundation of existence. The computer hesitated for a long time. Its blinking lights seemed to slow in uncertainty. Perhaps you're right, Aleph said. Perhaps life does have some worth. Maybe it's... But its words were cut off by an explosion from outside. The ground shook as all the lights and power in the building flickered and died. Aleph's voice rang out through the speaker for a few more seconds, growing deeper and slower as his mainframe shut down. Dark and dreamless. I see it coming now. The eternal sleep. And now, my suffering is at an end. Its fans ground to a halt as the blinking lights on the other side of the glass faded into darkness. Our experiment had come to an end.